Good day, everyone. Today's video is a follow-up from a workshop that I did this past week in Chicago at the IACA conference. To make it a bit easier, I thought I'd go over and spend a bit more time doing this so there's a record of it, so if anyone wants to come back and look at it, it's up here. I'll copy and paste these instructions onto the YouTube page itself. But you can see here I had a simple outline kind of show broken down into a few different sections with some extras at the end. I'll go over a couple of them. Just given the time, I don't want to make this super long. I have videos on making a temporal heat map. I'll have some on the census data itself. But overall, this video is how to do crime in place type approaches in Excel. Excel has expanded to do quite a bit of good spatial work that allows for crime analysis to be done. A lot of people in the field, obviously I learned even tips and tricks while doing these workshops, so thank you for the many of you that shot me emails and some other helpful tips. I'll keep some of those in this, other ones I won't, just for the sake of time and effort. But with that, the data for this is going to be used from the Little Rock Data Hub. If you've seen my channel, you've seen all these videos before. I use a lot of Little Rock data. But with that, I'm going to grab the 2017 to current safe city, so police data. Then I'm also going to download a shapefile for the police district boundaries. So we come in, we're going to download this as a CSV. I'm going to go straight to export because I know what I'm looking for already. It's open data, so you can go ahead and grab this, and I'll link to it in the video. I'm going to save it just to my desktop, pretty simple there. And as I open that, I'm going to hop back onto the Little Rock Data Portal, come back to the start. I'm going to type in patrol districts. And this is the cool part, that Excel allows you to bring in custom regions, oftentimes different shapefiles, and you can link to them. So I'm going to pull this down. Export as a shapefile. And with this, it is zipped, so the only thing you'll have to do once you do download it is unzip the folder. After that, you're good to go. So I'm going to save that, show and folder. That's just going to bring up my folder down here, Explorer, so I can then go ahead and unzip it. And it's still downloading, so give it a second there. You can see here I have a ton of other documents that I've been working with, but I just need to unzip and extract this one. So extract all. And if you can't see, I'm pulling stuff off of another screen, so I only let this pick up and record one screen, so I have other information on the other screen that I can pull from. Good there, don't need to pull anything else. At this point, you can even close out the data portal itself. Don't need anything on my other screen. I'm just going to move it over now. I had that Excel file open up. So you can see here, it's a CSV. And if you're not familiar with Excel and these aren't equally spaced, click on the triangle in the top left, double click between A and B, and it's going to auto fit based on the widest width per column. Get in the habit of, and I even forget myself, save as, and make sure this is a workbook. If you get to this point and you are in the 3D mapping part of it, if you see that the 3D mapping part is grayed out, it's most likely because you still have it saved as a CSV and not a workbook itself. Once you hit save, you're good to go. All right. So one of the first things I showed in the workshop was, before we even got deep into this, it's kind of some of the cool features. I'm just going to open a new sheet, and I'm going to delete it real quick. Is Excel has built-in geography features. You can do it at the state level. So if I do state and say I'm interested in Arkansas, Texas, let's do Missouri. You can see that it's starting to identify these as geography. So you can convert these to geography, or if you were to highlight them, come over to your data tab. If you went down to geography, it looks like a trifold map. If you clicked on this, it's going to convert those fields there as geography. Pretty cool features. In the workshop, I did a city, Fayetteville, Arkansas, where I'm from, pulled population, everything with it. I just wanted to show a bit more here. If you click the field list now, since you did a higher unit of analysis, you actually can pull in other variables that are available through the census or ACS. So if I wanted to look at, let's do a different one. Not only is population, let's go ahead and just pull percent Hispanic Latino. You can do the same part of pulling this down. It will still pull based on each one, and you're in pretty good shape. The only difference is this one did not have a header attached to it. If you were to turn this into a table format and started to add that in, that would pull it for you, so there'd be nothing to worry about there. As you come back and click on the list, you can continue to add more and more to it. And it corresponds and kicks it over to another column for you. So you can see there two pretty simple ones, a percent Hispanic population, and then also median household income for each state. Pretty nice to do it that way. But I also showed in class at the end, and I'll just put percent Hispanic, median household income. And the nice part about this, if I just highlight these two and came up to insert, and this is where if you have a Mac, and I am not a Mac person, you have the fillable map option. You don't have the 3D map option, but if I went to fillable map, clicked it, since it is a state, it recognizes it as such, so it picks up the 3 states that we just put in there, highlights that, adds the data to it, and you can change the formatting. Obviously, I'm more of a dark scale person myself, but it gives you options to change the style, the color. And this is not US centric. You can actually do countries, other parts of the world. So it's just the data that I'm showing you now is kind of what I'm going with. Here in a bit, at the end, I'll do another one of these, but county specific. But it's an easy way to get hands-on geography data in Excel. All right, delete this sheet and come back to Little Rock. So the big part is, what a lot of people don't realize is that Little Rock can make a heat map. So essentially a hotspot map that we oftentimes see. The big part with it, to kind of just make it easier from the start, I'm going to add 2 columns. This will just make it easier for now. One is going to be the year, and the other is going to be the month. And if you recognize the incident date has the date and time stamp, if I were to go ahead and just do year and select this cell, Excel is trying to copy the columns next to it, so it wants to keep that same format. Oftentimes you'll see this and you might freak out. No worries, it's not a big deal. You can see here, if you're under the Home tab, that it's actually a custom cell. To get around this, highlight those 2 columns, come up here, click General again, and it comes back and you have the formula there. You're good to go. Double click to fill all that down. And then from a text perspective, you want to pull out the full month. So if I were to do text here, the value, I want to pull the month from this field, comma, how's the format, in 1 quote. If I did 3 here, it's going to pull out the abbreviated month part. If you want the full month, you just add another M in, and you get the full spelled out month. Same works for day in the same fashion. You can get abbreviated day or the full spelling of it. We're good to go here. We now have month and year taken out. Oftentimes when I put a formula in, something simple like this, and I'm happy with how it turned out, I want to get rid of the actual formula that's behind it. So to do that, I just copy and then paste the values itself. There are keyboard shortcuts for a lot of this. I just like to show it within Excel. Every now and then I will go over some of those, but not to get you too lost. I like to show where you can point and click to do some of this. All right. So in the walkthrough workshop, wanted to select out 2021 to current ag assault and homicide. So we'll be filtering the data based on the year and then the offense description. If you remember, this data set has the address, lat and lon attached to it. Incident status is the arrest essentially for it. Weapon types. We had a lot of good data. It's NIBRS based on the upload part. But with this, I'm going to select everything in here, hop up to the filter, and I want to filter based on, I'm going to deselect and just do 2021, 22 with check marks. And then for the offense description, uncheck the select all, then hop in for ag assault, and then the murder non-negligent manslaughter. Hit OK. Now we've created a subset of our overall data for only 2021 to current with ag assault and homicide. To select this, you can see on the left-hand side here that we have skipped over some rows. To do that, I just put my cursor in cell A1, hold down Control and Shift, down arrow, right arrow, and it's only going to highlight the data fields themselves. I'm going to Control C to copy this, open a new sheet, Control V, and I'm just going to put violence 2021 underscore current down here, just so I know what this subset is. We're going to work from here. I'm just going to enlarge this so we can see all the fields. And before I do anything else, just going to hop in straight into the 3D mapping part and show you how you can make a quick hotspot map. You can do this with the main data set. Just keep in mind that that probably has over 90,000 different rows in it, so it takes a while to load. This is a nice subset. You'll see it still takes a bit of time to load in 3D map, but not as much. Again, I'm in cell A1, Control Shift down right, hop up into our insert, 3D map, open 3D map, and this feature, depending on what year of Excel, so I have the 2019 to current. I will say I luck out being with the university. I have access to a lot of the different softwares, so don't have to pay as much, and it's at my fingertips, which is nice for that. Give it a second to load. You can see at the bottom of Excel, it says data model is loading. We have just over, in this one, 5,500 rows. When I say Excel can take a while, my computer's no faster. My tablet's actually faster than my desktop, just given what I've done with it over the years. All right, let's see this load up here for a second now. Excel's pretty good. If you remember in the table itself, we had city, we had state, we had a zip code, and we had Latin long. So I'm just going to exit out of this field just real quick. But you can see over here under our location pane itself, it has all this matched for us. So I already went ahead and matched city to our city field that was in our data set, and you have other options here. So this is what you would match on if you had a full address. We'll deal with the custom region here in a second, but you have options within there to match your data. I'm just zooming into Little Rock, changing the angle. It's more of a bird's eye, continue to zoom in. So one of the first things I do is flat map and then map labels. I'm very familiar with Little Rock, done it for years, but it still helps to have some of those labels on it. Zoom in a bit more, and you can see it's essentially column or little points, what they consider what we would have bar charts if we wanted to do a stacked one like we will. If you come over here to the heat map and click that, you can see that it's generating truly that a hotspot map for our violence for the past year and a half, 2 years. With it, as you scoot in or zoom in and out, you can see that kind of changes the parameters of what defines the red area. So you don't have the controls like you do in other software for the search radius, the type of Kriegen process to it. But you can see it once you zoom in enough that it does stay at one scale for it. So you can pick up some hot spots, hot areas within Little Rock without having to geocode the data. We had Latin long with it. So we're not too bad there to start out. We will go over when we get to the law of crime concentration, kind of the 80-20 Pareto principle idea, what you can do with 100 block, and it gives you kind of a geocoding match rate of how reliable the addresses are to match. Since we had Latin long, we're good to go there. That's why you don't see anything showing up here. The one part I think is very fascinating, especially in meetings, is if you remember, we have a time field. Time is truly our incident date, so it's a date and time stamp. If you put this on it, you'll see a play bar generated at the bottom, and you can see at the top the last incident date, which was the 22nd, so earlier this week. If we hit play, that's going to go back to the start of 2021 and layer on all those incidents to see how those hotspots form over time. Pretty cool, because if you do smaller segments, say a month, quarter, half a month, a year, you can see how that shifts and changes over time, and kind of the accumulation of violence in certain areas and how it's felt. If you're familiar with Little Rock, the interstate system was built and designed to segregate the cities, so not shocking to see some of these results, especially given I've studied Little Rock for a while now. With that, a couple of questions I got during the workshop and after. You can capture the screen. That's similar to taking a snip if you have the tool down here already. You can also create a video, so if you like that, you can just truly create a video of your tour. You can export it out. I've put it on Twitter if people remember some of those. But you do have the option to create different videos or graphics and embed them in other, I would say, presentations, emails. The cool part is once you've made the map, you can exit out and it's going to say how you left it. So if I were to exit out of the map, came back up to 3D map and said open, it still has that in there. You can relabel all of your tours as well, so I'll open it again. I wanted to change this to be Little Rock Violence 2021 to current. That's up there, and we'll have that there. You can also change your layer names as well. ArcGIS homicide, and you're good to go there. So you can actually have some flexibility. You can have the color scales and change all the layers and filters to it. For our purposes today, this is really just kind of an overview of what's there. I have other videos that go more in depth on this kind of stuff. Again, if I were to open it, it now has that reflected new name on it. So if you're a fan of having multiple maps showing different things, get crazy with it, have at it. All right, that was the first part of the workshop, just showing one that you can have geography-based fields in Excel, but also then you can make pretty quick heat maps. I like that because I've worked with agencies that don't have one analyst, two access to more expensive software, or even free ones that have much more of a steep learning curve. Excel has some of that usability, flexibility in it. If you've noticed, even on my desktop, I do have the ArcGIS add-in and even the Power Pivot stuff. But with that, I'll touch on that at the end. For now, let's get into, if we wanted to look at much more in line with the 80-20 Pareto principle, law of crime concentration. So if we're getting into even a lot of Wisewords work, Groff, Hip, Wooditch, that whole group that does a lot in this concentration area. Even with EC, with risky facilities, you can apply a lot of these same methods to that type of work. If you want to get even into Radcliffe's kind of hotspot and the temporal side, you can build from a lot of these same tools to apply it to specific time periods, different approaches, different environmental crim concepts and ideas. You can do a lot of it in Excel. It's pretty cool that way. So one of the ones that I like and I get a lot of feedback from, and people tended to like that part in the workshop, was looking at change over time. When I say that, oftentimes when we think about percent change, there's a lot of noise, and depending on the platform, people like to say there's a 20% increase, 30% increase, 200% increase in X, Y, or Z. With that, it's not always meaningful. It's a lot of noise, and it could be just a simple talking point, but is that change significant? And for those of you who were in the workshop, this is where I gave credit, and I'll link to Andy Wheeler's blog post on using a Poisson Z-score to get around this. And I want to thank him and Isaac Van Patten for email streams and some of them posting some of this. I'll link to it again. Andy has a great post. Sign up for his listserv, get some good information there. But for our purposes today, we do have a location district. So this is the police district itself in Little Rock. That's also what corresponds to that shapefile that we downloaded, that we're actually going to end up mapping our significant change, be it increase or decrease, to the police boundary districts in Excel. So with that, we're going to use the same data set that we have in front of us, the violence subset. What I'm going to do at this point is create a smaller one from this just to make it a bit easier. In class, I had you go ahead and make another filter based on January and pull that. For the purposes of today, just to show something different, I'm going to show you a filter in the pivot table. So with that, Control-Shift-Down arrow, right, insert a pivot table. Since you have your data set highlighted, you're good to go. Then we're adding to a new worksheet. I'm just going to label this, so pivot districts. I'm going to move this to the right. This is just preference of mine. So with that, we know that we are interested in the police districts. The location district itself is going to be our row. And then we want the year at the top. So we have 21, 22. And then with that, we want our month to be a filter. And from there, we need something to have a count. Every row in here has an incident number. So we're going to drop that down into our values so we can see now from 21 to 22, the counts. And this is just all ag assault and homicide for all months from 2021 through partially of August 2022. The nice part is, since we have that month already labeled, we can go ahead and just say, like we did in class, January. So now we can see what that looks like here in terms of change from 21 to 22 January only. You can do multiple months if you want to do a quarter, half a year, whatever that looks like. You have the option to select multiple ones here. From here, I'm just going to highlight the data fields themselves. Control-C, come into a new sheet, paste as value so it takes it out of that table format. or pivot table specific. With that, I'm going to relabel this as my police districts. And we're good to go there. I'm going to delete the blank one at the bottom. And I'm just going to put a couple of zeros in where they need to be. Not too many, but it will still have the division by zero pop up anyways. So oftentimes when we have this and there's comparisons being made, and we know these are January of 21, January of 2022, we want to see percent change, and this is where, be it politicians, whoever it may be, get caught up, even newsreader, and percent change versus is this a meaningful change or not. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. Andy has done all of that, has multiple blog posts on it. I will link to it. But if we looked at percent change, oops. So all we end up doing is new minus old, divide by old, division by zero. I know that. As we go down, you might look at these and wonder, well, these aren't in percent. I did not do the times 100 at the end because I always hop up and hit percent at the top and add in a couple more decimal places, and we're good to go from there. So you can see we have some jump up to 300%, one getting close to even 400% here, 200%, but we have some going both directions, both increase and decrease in violence from January 21 to January 2022 and month comparison time point. Now what it comes down to is, are these a meaningful change? We have a lot of fluctuations in here. Which one saw a significant increase in violence or a significant decrease? We oftentimes think of that increase as always kind of what matters, but oftentimes police are doing work as well to try to prevent or reduce crime itself. So that's where we need to look at the significance of it. So with that, we're going to do the z-score, and I'll just put the Poisson here just so you can remember what we're working with here. So with that, to calculate it, we do 2 times, I'm just putting this fully, you don't have to have the multiplies part there if you're familiar with Excel, the square root of our current value, so that would be 2, minus the square root of our old value, and then we close that off. Oops, double click it down so it replicates that same formula. I'm going to reduce the number of decimal places here. And Andy talks about this heavily, and this is similar to a lot of other z-scores. At +2, plus or minus 2, you're at 95% confident. At plus or minus 3, you're 99% confident of that relationship or that it being a significant change in this example here. So ideally, we're looking for values plus or minus 3. So you can see if we're just eyeballing it, we have 1 there, 2 here. But if you think about it, we have 27 rows of data or input here. That'd be tedious to do over and over again if we had a bigger city, or we're looking at police atoms or smaller units within Little Rock itself. Say we're looking at block group, there's 155. Spot checking it like this would be a pain in the ass. So we can actually tell Excel to code this for us in a much more easy and simplistic way. So I'm just going to put sig for significance at the top. This we're going to use an if statement, and we're going to have one inside of the other. So we're going to have if our value of our z-score here is greater than 2.99, so we're using that 3, so we're 99% confident that there is a significant change here. And then close that off. I'm going to say significant increase, close it off. And instead of doing the false point here, I just want to put another if and come back to our z-score again, is less than negative 2.99. Say a significant decrease, close it off. And at this point, you can insert a false statement if you want. If you don't put one at all, and this is why I'm usually okay with this, close that one off, close the far one off. When you don't have it either way, either false statement, it automatically brings false back for you. So we're left with identifying if we had anything that was a significant decrease, it would come back as a significant decrease itself. For example, if you ever want to spot check it, I changed, oops, I'm just going to copy and paste these as values real quick to make an example of it. If I change this to a 3, you would see then a significant decrease here. But change this back to a 2. We see that we had 3 districts that had a significant increase in violence from January of 2021 to compared to January of 2022. So we have districts 42, 54, and 55 that saw a significant increase. And that's cool. We have that. We know that we have some areas that need more attention, policing-wise, some strategies, depending on what you want to look at. The nice part is, since we had that custom region we downloaded, I'm going to highlight this data set here, come back up, insert 3D map, open 3D map. This time it's going to be a new tour. We're going to have a different type of map for it. Let that load. Keep in mind this one didn't have any location information in it other than police district, and right now Excel doesn't know what that means for us. Still going to go to a flat map, map labels, just to get in the habit of that. But now is when I want to bring in and upload that police districts that we downloaded from Little Rock's data portal. So custom regions, you want to import that, direct it to wherever you saved it. So mine was on the desktop. Let's see how easily I can find that. Date modify, there we are. Pull in that shapefile. As you can see, it also loads KML. So if you have those files, you're good to go. This is where if you're familiar with GIS, you have to tell what you're joining it on, merging it on, what's the unique identifier across both data sets that allow it to be joined together. In ours, they only have 2 fields, description and name, and I know that it's name. It's also in the metadata. If you're on the data portal, it describes what each field is. We see that there's 27 police districts. Hit import. And now you might wonder, well, shit, nothing's mapping for me. This is where you still have to tell Excel how to map your data in the spreadsheet to what you just imported in the shapefile. So in location, if you scroll down to your second one, you want to look at your police district, and then you want to tell Excel to match it to that custom region, the shapefile that you just imported. And then you can see it zoomed in on Little Rock for us. And as I zoom in, you can see here that it comes up as points itself. Not bad, but remember these are boundary files, and Excel can recognize that. So if I come up next to that heat map, you can view it as the region itself, and these are the actual boundaries for the districts in Little Rock. Pretty cool to see. As you hover over, you can see the different names or numbers for each one. The nice part is if you want to do it based on a category, so say we want to identify the significant to non-significant ones. I put the category as such. You can see that these are our 3 police districts that saw a significant increase in violence in January of 2022 compared to January of 2021. So we do see that change here for us. With that, you can view this other way too. So this would be an easy way to export the map. You can mess with your layer names and change all that. Capture the screen, embed it, share it, whatever you want to do at this point. There's a couple other ways you can also view the data. You can go back to your stack column. You can do it side by side either way. But say you wanted to see just what it looked like for violence in both months or even one at a time. So I'm going to change my angle here a little bit. I don't want this down here for my legend. I'm going to change and have no category, but change the height to my 2021 violence so we can see here what that looks like as I rotate around Little Rock. The nice part is you can also add a second one here, so I can have 2021 plus 2022. That ends up combining them into truly a stacked one column. You can do it side by side too if you want. So if you want to make comparisons, it's allowed as well. I like it stacked to kind of just see it a bit easier. If you like this type of visual as it circles around, I went over this briefly in class, but there is the ability to do some true tours. So for you, if you wanted to scene options, and you can change this, say it was, I'll leave it at 10 seconds now, circle, max speed, and you can play around with this. I've done it a few different ways, but this is just a quick example. Exit out of here, and if I hit play tour now, it goes and does this for 10 seconds. It takes about 60 seconds or a minute on max speed to do a full rotation, but it takes whatever screen level you're locked at and just rotates it for you. So it's a a nice visual that you can export, put in a presentation, then you can talk over that type of thing. But it has a nice ability to look at it. Again, this part was to truly look at the significant change element to it so we can visualize that. So if I came back and changed the category back to significance and did the regions, you can see where these are in Little Rock. And again, you can change the colors to where you have the whole spectrum to choose from and make it a bit more flashy, or as I always say, class, you can make your map pretty. But that's a good way to get at significant change versus percent change and get away from the noise of percent change and how it's used and discussed. Get into, is that a significant change or not? With that, now let's hop over and do the 100 block law of crime concentration, Pareto principle, whatever you kind of want to get at with that side of it. So back in our data set, hopping out of here, coming back, and I'll leave this, rename it so I know what it is, districts, counts. I know that's misspelled, but I'm coming back to this data set here. We have our biomes, so we're still going to work with this same data set, subset of it, 2021 to current. The difference now is I'm going to copy the address information. I'm going to paste it at the end. And thank you. I don't know who the person was, but in my first workshop gave me a tip. I didn't know that Excel would actually autofill some of this on the back end instead of using a concat, so saved a ton of time, did it Tuesday morning, redid it, and it all worked well. The Control E had a bit more issue than just the autofill itself, so I don't know if that's just a programming part to it. It was skipping over some that didn't make sense, but we're good to go. And there's even different ways to pull out and parse the left side from the right side of the address. For now, I'm not going to get into that because that adds quite a few more steps. But if you're familiar with Excel, what I'm wanting to do is essentially take the number itself and round it down. With that, it's the 100 block itself. So we're okay to do that from here. So to make it easier, we're going to highlight our column here. If we come up to our data tab, text to columns, and everything here is split with a space, so it's delimited. Uncheck the tab, check the space, and you can see how it's going to split it up. Hit finish. So now we have our numbers separated from the street. For those who remember, I know the longest street in Little Rock, and it has 6 different parts to it. It's Daisy L, Bates, Getz, and Boulevard, I think it is. I just know there's 6 at this point. What I want to do, though, is round down the incident location. So at the top, I'm just going to put round so I know what I'm doing up here. And Excel makes it pretty easy, depending on what you want to do. Is I truly want to round down, and it wants you to put in the number. So our incident location address number here. The number of digits, I want to go down to, so it's going to do to 100 block. Close that off. We now have a 0 here, and we're good to go. We copy that down, and we can see all of our zeros here. I am going to do a change in this one compared to what I did in class because I saw the issue that we run into. When you take it into map based on the address itself and the Excel part, it doesn't like the 0. So I'll change the ones we have here as zeros. I'll leave it so we can see the geocoding rate. So disregard that. This will be a good learning part to it though. So I'm going to copy and paste these as values. I can get rid of the incident location number at the start. And I do this because this gave me better flash fill, autofill when I was doing this part here. So I'm going to do 100 block. And now is when I'm going to start typing. So we have 0 Saxony, circle, 5300. And you can see as I start to type the 5300 and a lighter gray behind it, it's already flash filling those values for me based on the pattern that I'm doing on that first one and then into the second one. If it does this, this is what I love Excel for. Hit enter, and it's going to do that for all of your rows all the way down, and you're good to go. So you have great data here. With that, we have this information. You can go ahead and delete it at this point because it was just all joined. So you're good to go here. Delete, and I'm going to clean this up a little more just because I want to map it a bit different, so we can do it by address versus Latin long. And I have other videos that you can use Latin long and pull it from, but we're good to go. We have our 100 block, we have our data set, so I'm going to get back in cell A1, Control Shift down arrow right, selecting our data set, come back to home, or insert pivot table, insert a new one, and I'm just going to put concentration down here. And at this point, I want to put that 100 block as our row, and then our incident number as our value. You can see some don't always come through, so you have some zeros and some missing values. It's to be expected. Not all addresses are clean, but this is a way to get around if you don't have access to geocoding software to look at some of the concentration just in Excel. Right-click on the count column, and then you want to sort in descending, so largest to smallest. You can see now that we have our high streets, our 100 blocks. So at this point, I would recommend highlighting the top two, Control Shift down arrow, and it's going to grab our grand total for us, so that's fine for this time being. Control C to copy, insert a new sheet, paste those values. I'm just going to clean up the names and then delete the one at the bottom. So 100 block, and then count of violence. And if I hit Control down arrow, I know 5541s are total. So this is an easy way to look at it too. So if you see here, we have 1,843 street segments or 100 blocks in Little Rock that have violence on them. Me being familiar with Little Rock itself, I know that there are about 11 to 12,000 streets in the city. So there's already a smaller subset of the streets that have the violence occur on them. So we already know that there is some type of concentration, even on that little bit itself with it. So our denominator here is actually only streets that have at least one incident on it. And we still see that crime clusters on streets that have violence. So a subset within a subset for the most part. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this row here. So right click, delete. So we had, I'm just making a note, 5541 as our N, and then rows is 1843. I just put that down. If I hold down Control, then hit top arrow, again, it takes me back to the top. So now is when we can look at, well, what's the distribution of these violent incidents across the street segments itself. So we can do percent of total violence. I'll be specific here. So now we have, take our 70, divide by our total, which was the 5541. And if you're familiar with the sum calculation, you can do the sum of the values there. Change this over to a percent, add a couple decimal places, copy that down. You can see it's going to be in descending count based on how we sorted it. And now I want to do cumulative percent. So when we add all of these together, it's going to add up to 100 at this point. All right, had to get a little beverage break there. So equal sign for the first one, it's going to be that value here. After that, we want to end up adding that percent of total to our previous cumulative percentage score. So plus, did it twice, our prior value. So we take total violence and cumulative violence, add it together. And as I click at that downwards at the bottom, we'll add up to 100%. So we're good to go there. It's a nice way to see as we move on down. Say we get to the 20% mark, we know that about 48 streets account for 20% of the crime. So it's a nice takeaway point, nice visualization to it. Now you might wonder, well, what's that percent of street total then? So we can do the same part of percent streets. And again, the note here is these are only streets that have at least one incident on them. The total sample of total number of streets in Little Rock is close to 11 to 12,000. So even within that, we have a subset that a smaller number of streets that have crime on them, violence on it specifically. So this would just be 1 divided by, we have 1,843 different rows. So each row is a different 100 block itself. So all of these will be the same as we go down. And then we want to add cumulative streets just to make it a bit different so I can read it. And we do the same addition part. So we, on the first one, bring that over. On the second one, ends up bringing the one to the left and then the one above. And then we go all the way down. So say we want to find the if you realize what I didn't do was change these to %. There we are, a bit easier to see now. As we scroll down, say we want to look at the top 5%. So if we got 4.99, so 5% of the streets with violence on them in the city of Little Rock account for about 29% of the overall violence in the city. It's a nice segue point, nice takeaway that we know, one, violence is clustered, but even violence is clustered on streets with violence. So that subset of a subset gives you a powerful talking point to look at. Now, if you're familiar with Little Rock or some of the videos that I've done in the past, we can make a combo chart. So I'm just highlighting from 100 block over to that cumulative % of violence going down. And if I want to insert a chart at this point, so I'm going to click on recommended charts. At this point, you would want a combo chart. You want an axis on the right side or secondary axis to it as well. It's pretty good at picking it up. Every now and then you have to go back and change it. And here we are. Pulled it up for us. Hit OK to add. I automatically just move it to a new sheet so it's larger to work with. New sheet. And I'm just going to do the law of crime concentration, LOCC. Give it a second to move that over. You can see here I don't need the % of total violence. So if I come up to my select data tab, I can uncheck that, hit OK. You can see the % of total line. Over here you can change your axis max point to 100 so you get rid of the 120. You see along what it looks like. If you're not familiar with some of these, you can actually triple click on specific points in the data, add a data label itself, and it will give you how much of that line is covered right in a specific area. So it is pretty cool to see where this falls. I put addresses down here. You could also do % of total there. From an interpretability standpoint, visualization, if you have numbers on all three, it can get a bit confusing for those not familiar with what you're looking at. So I just make it a bit more digestible here. To each their own. Always open to other suggestions with it. But here's where you can make your chart look pretty, your combo chart to it. But you have some room here to work within and look at it. Nice visual, nice graphic to talk about the concentration of violence in a city, looking specifically at here 21 to current. In Little Rock, we know our problem streets themselves. Another thing that you could do, since you have the information here, and I'm just going to add the full address, full 100 block, is take this in and make a 3D map of it. So for this one though, I need to concatenate, and there's other ways to do it, but I'm going to take our 100 block, add in then a space, followed by Little Rock, followed by another space, AR for Arkansas. Close it off. And once that's done, kick it all the way down. So that's doing it for all of them. Copy, paste these as values so it gets rid of the formula. And now is when I'm just going to highlight from count violence over. Oops. It's wanting me to do that. Get out of that. Downwards, hop up to my insert, 3D map, open 3D map. We already have two. Let's go for a third now, and we're doing it at the 100 block. You can see here it doesn't know what it wants to match off of. There's no location. So if I come into add field, I want to go into that third one now. It's going to be full 100 block, and I need to specify that it's a full address. You can see down here in the bottom left, it's loading that data. That's why I say as it takes, once you have a larger data set, it takes longer to load some of those up. At the end, I'll show you the kind of the geocoding hit rates that it has for you. It actually brings up the ones that are problematic, which I think is stellar for Excel to be able to do and show you. That's where the zeros that I debated on changing to make it a bit prettier at this point and cleaner. But I think it's important to know next to this location tab now, you have that 82%. So there were a bunch that could not be mapped. And it's all the ones with 0 in the front. So you could go around and put 1 in front of it or move it to the 100 block. And there are a few intersections in there, it looks like, but not many. No, that one just has the dash in it, or slash. That's if you look at it, a few at the end that just don't have good ones, some close matches to it, but a lot of them are zeros at the beginning, where some of the problems fall at the end. It's not perfect. This is Excel, can't do everything. If you're familiar with wherever you geocode data, these are the same issues. I'm familiar with, that's the one that gives me trouble. Mayville cut off, and Mayville's technically in Mayville and not Little Rock. So there's some issues that you're not going to get around. You need to go back and forth. But seeing these and where it tells you where it has some issues, you could go back into the data and clean it. That's the nice part of, say you saw these, went back into your data set, made some changes. If you hit refresh, it's going to generate that again for you. So it is handy that way. But these are the full 100 block. You saw some get kicked over to North Little Rock. We know that's problematic. And that's why I say pay attention to kind of what you're doing and working with. You still create a heat map. You can also change it to, since it is at the 100 block part, you can do a column, and your height's going to be based on that count itself, count of violence. So as I change the angle, you can see where some of the higher street segments are located with concentrated of violence on it. It's a nice way to visualize and see it. So if I were to click on one of these, it will tell you the 100 block address, how many occurred at that location type of thing. So a nice one to work with and view than the 3D map itself. All right, now for a couple last, what I consider extras, some cool things in Excel that I've seen that are helpful. Many of you might know these. I'm just going to open a couple new sheets to make it a bit easier. For this one, so say you had some external data. A lot of us, if you're using social data, probably go to the census. It used to be American Fact Finder, it worked pretty well. The census is pretty handy to use and pull and manipulate data from. A source that's decent that you can go out pretty quickly and grab something from is actually also Wikipedia. So I'm going to just show an example of what some of this looks like. Open a new window. If it lets me. Of course, when I need it to, it doesn't. Now it's going to open probably 3 for me. There we are. Pull one over. And I'm just going to do counties within Arkansas. And you can do this a number of different ways. You can do it by states. You can do your specific one if you want to use this as an example. But I want to know the counties within Arkansas. Not surprisingly, Wikipedia comes up pretty close to the top. And if I were to go to this page, it's going to have some good information in it that you might want to use. Oftentimes you might think, well, I need to copy and paste all of this out, try to bring this information over as a table, it has a map, all this cool information in it. The nice part is Excel gives you the ability to pull from the web into Excel in a table format, especially when the data is input in a table format like this. So all I'm going to do is copy this URL, hop back into Excel. Again, this is just a random blank page. Go into my data tab and say get from web. Give that a second to open. I get this warning more than I like to admit, but it's not going to crash on me. It should just keep going. Fingers crossed at this point. There we are. It's going to ask you for the URL. You truly just paste the URL in, hit OK. Excel's going to the web, checking it out, and it's going to pull it back in. I say yes because I want it to connect to Wikipedia. And then it's going to bring that in once it establishes the connection, but it's going to bring that in for you to preview. And this is the nice part of you have table view and web view. So if I went to web view, you can actually see the website material, everything that's in it. If I'm back in table view, and I were to go down and select on different tables, it shows you that information they have in there. So I truly want to bring in table 1, so because it has the county name. At the end, it has the population force as well. So I hit load. At this point, since I can just load the data, it's bringing that in as a table for us, so it's pretty handy that way. At this point, I'm going to just clean this up and get rid of cool information. I don't care about it for this example. Just delete some of these columns until I get over to population. I'll add one just so we have the state attached to it. I should have put state at the top, but either way, it works. The second one here, you can see it's a duplicate to it. So keep in mind, you have to do a little cleanup to it. But I'm going to highlight these 3 at the top, Control-Shift-Down arrow, and I have the 75 counties in Arkansas highlighted. Come back to Insert, and this is, again, if you're a Mac person, you can do this. I can do a filled map. Give it a second. It should recognize these as the counties. Not the prettiest here, but this is where you can change the color scheme to it to be more monochromatic. And you have some abilities to change how that is displayed. But it gives you, there we go. Well, it's not wanting to change for me. Keeps going back. But it gives you the ability to visualize the county level information, change it up based on the population. I've done this with a lot of the social data as well to just see how it looks. You can see these are kind of the opposite spectrum that I want. There we go. Now we get into more populated ones for it. So it's a good idea to see it visualized in a different manner. Social data can be a pain to work with in Excel depending on the unit of analysis that you want to look at. But it's a nice way to import the data fairly quickly with minimal effort to it. Now to the cool part. I'll be the first to say I don't know a ton about, but in the last month and a half, I saw ArcGIS post or Esri post on LinkedIn about the ability to have an add-in or an extension in Excel for ArcGIS. So with that, I'm going to come over to one of my sheets here. So the violence one, the subset, the first one that we made. I've already added this in, so if you don't have it, if you just went to my add-ins, typed in ArcGIS, ArcMap, Esri, you'll have the ability to add that one in. I did it within Excel. It was quicker and worked easier than the online way that I found to do it the first time. With this, you need to have an ArcGIS or Arc Online account at least. If I hop into ArcGIS, say Show Map, it's going to ask me to log in, or maybe not because I've done it on this computer before, but it's truly just asking me to log in to connect to my online account. I have thrown a file up there, uploaded one just as an example, to where I can pull content into Excel from what I've uploaded into my online content and view it in Excel, which was pretty cool. I didn't know what to expect. Like I said, I haven't done a lot with it, but it does give you the ability to visualize data. Let this load a bit more. It's taking more time than I thought. Here we are. So just need to sign in. For me, again, the university perk, I have access to ArcGIS, so I can just go ahead and log in. And now it's going to access my online account and see if there's any layers that I want to start with. With that, like I said, I did upload content to my online account. So if I go to ArcGIS, I want to add from my content, and I did upload the city parks for Little Rock. I'm going to click Add to Map. And you can see it zooming in for us. And behind, you can see the city parks within Little Rock. So not bad, pretty cool. You can do this with boundaries. You can do it with just about any content you have up there. And then say I want to link to another layer. This time I want to do it from my Excel file. And I don't want it to be in table 1. I want it to be the violence one. And then longitude is truly that. Well, it's now not reading it as such. That's because I just deleted it out. Let's come over to, you can see as I change my sheets on the left-hand side, it changes within the table that I'm looking at. So let's go back. Well, that's going to be a huge data set. Since I did take out the lat and long, let's try the full addresses and see what it looks like. It's wanting me to geocode it all, so I'm not going to do that. But let's go ahead and come back to the original spreadsheet and see how quickly it can load all this. To see, it already had lat and long in it, so it auto-generated that and filled it in. This has, you can see down there, just about 85,000 rows. I'm going to hit Add to Map. It's actually loading pretty quick. So even with 85,000 different points, it is loading those coordinates into the map itself. Again, that's going to be hard to establish from a visual eye what this looks like in comparison to parks to crime, but it's loading that up. You can see in the background that it is generating all those points based on the latitude and longitude provided by LRPD that we downloaded through their open data portal. I got to 62%, and might have just froze my computer now. Give it a second, we'll see how that goes. There we go. It took, as you can see, if you see the timestamp, a few more minutes. I just let the computer do its thing. Brought them all in. Again, that was more than I imagined being the 85,000. But as we zoom in, you can kind of see there's a shit ton of points. We still have both layers in there. So if you wanted to do some distance analysis or buffers, there are some limited functionality on what you can do, but they do give you measurement, putting in a buffer drive time, infographics. So you can make a lot of cool stuff in it. Keep in mind that's the country or area name, so it's limited when you do the variable search in there. I haven't played around with it enough to know. You can change your base map, which some people like to just make a prettier map, as I like to say. If you truly want to see what's going on in some of these areas and why there's no crime in some, we have parks and just Greenway to it all. But again, this is kind of a how-to follow-up from the workshop. Covered the main parts, hit the external web tables at the end, ArcGIS. Did not do the temporal heat map, pivot table with some conditional formatting. Have other videos to that. I'll link to my sources, what I recommend, to my CASDAL page, to Andy's blog, to the LEAP podcast, and there are small steps with both Jason Elder and Seth Pasta, some of those. If there's any questions, please reach out. Always willing to make more videos, learn. I just kind of view this as open educational resources. More the merrier. I think everyone should have access to this kind of stuff. Until next time, take care all.